MBA diploma, but her hands were shaking for reasons that had nothing to do with achievement or joy. 3 minutes earlier, during the speech about futures and possibilities, a process server had walked down her row, confirmed her identity in a whisper, and handed her a manila envelope. She knew what it was before she opened it. The divorce papers were clipped neatly, signed by Derek with a lawyer's stamp, requesting immediate dissolution of their 7-year marriage. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. Instead, she stood when her name was called, walked across that stage with her head high, and accepted her diploma while her phone buzzed insistently in her clutch purse. The ceremony continued around her like she was drowning underwater, sounds muffled and distant. When she finally looked up into the crowd, she saw him. Derek sat in the back row, arms crossed, wearing that smug expression she had grown to hate over the past 6 months. Next to him was Brooke, his 24-year-old girlfriend from his office, her hand resting on her visibly pregnant belly, smiling like she had won a prize. Imani's phone buzzed again. She pulled it out with trembling fingers. 12 missed calls from her business partner. 6 text messages from her lawyer, Margaret. 3 emails marked urgent from the pharmaceutical company. Her assistant had sent a final message in all caps. They want TO closed today. Now, where are you? The $450 million deal. The one she had been negotiating for 8 months. The one that would change everything. The one Derek knew nothing about because he never asked about her little business project. It was supposed to close at 2 o'clock, which was in exactly 97 minutes. She stood up during the closing remarks, clutching her diploma and her purse, and walked out of the auditorium. Behind her, she heard whispers. She heard someone laugh. She kept walking. The spring air hit her face as she pushed through the doors, and she finally let herself breathe. Her chest heaved as she leaned against the brick wall, fighting the urge to cry. Not here. Not now. Not for him. Her phone rang. Margaret. Imani, where are you? The board is waiting. They moved the meeting up. If we don't close this deal in the next 2 hours, they're walking away. This is it. Everything we've worked for. I'm coming, Imani said, her voice steady despite everything. Tell them I'm coming. She ended the call and looked down at the divorce papers still clutched in her other hand. Derek wanted the house. He wanted half of everything, claiming he had supported her through school. He had no idea. He thought she was broke. He thought her consulting business was a hobby that barely made enough to cover her tuition. He had no idea she had built an empire while he was too busy sleeping with his secretary to notice. Imani walked to her car, a modest sedan she had kept deliberately understated. She tossed the diploma in the back seat and the divorce papers in the passenger seat. Her hands were still shaking as she started the engine, but her mind was clear now. Crystal clear. She had a choice to make. She could fall apart or she could close the biggest deal of her life and show Derek exactly what he was losing. She chose the deal. The drive to downtown took 35 minutes. She used every second of it to transform. She called Margaret and confirmed the meeting details. She called her business partner, Dr. Patricia Holmes, and reviewed the final terms. She called her assistant and had her prepare the conference room. By the time she pulled into the parking garage of the glass tower that housed her company's offices, Imani Richardson was no longer the humiliated woman from the graduation ceremony. She was the CEO of Richardson Biotech Consulting, and she had a deal to close. She took the elevator to the 15th floor, her heels clicking against the marble as she walked through the lobby. Her assistant, Nicole, met her at the door with a tablet and a concerned expression. Are you okay? Margaret told me what happened. I'm fine, Imani said, taking the tablet. Is everyone here? They're in conference room A. The entire board flew in from New York. They're ready when you are. Imani nodded and walked to the bathroom first. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her makeup was still perfect. Her hair was still in place. Her cream suit was immaculate. She looked like success, even if she felt like her world was crumbling. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and walked out. The conference room was filled with 12 executives from Sterling Pharmaceuticals, the third largest drug company in the world. They stood when she entered. Dr. Holmes was already there, sitting at the head of the table, and she gave Imani an encouraging nod. Margaret sat to her right, legal documents spread before her. Gentlemen, Imani said, setting her bag down and taking her seat. Thank you for adjusting your schedule. I apologize for the delay. Shall we begin? For the next 90 minutes, Imani negotiated, clarified, and closed. She answered every question with precision. She addressed every concern with confidence. She had spent 8 months preparing for this moment, building the proposal that would revolutionize how Sterling Pharmaceuticals managed their clinical trial data. Her company would handle everything from recruitment to regulatory compliance, and in return, they would pay $450 million over 3 years with options for expansion. When the final signature was placed on the contract, the room erupted in handshakes and congratulations. The lead executive, a man named Thomas Burton, smiled broadly. "Ms. Richardson, this is the beginning of a very profitable partnership. Your company's reputation precedes you, but I have to say, you exceeded every expectation today." "Thank you, Mr. Burton," Imani said, shaking his hand firmly. "I look forward to the work ahead." As the executives filed out, Dr. Holmes pulled Imani aside. She was a woman in her 60s, elegant and sharp, who had mentored Imani since her first year of business school. "You did it," Patricia said quietly. "Even after everything that happened today, you did it. I'm proud of you." "I couldn't fall apart," Imani said, her voice finally cracking just slightly. "Not in front of them. Not in front of Derek." "Derek is a fool," Patricia said flatly. "And when the news of this deal breaks tomorrow morning, he's going to realize exactly how big of a fool he is." Imani nodded. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Derek calling. She declined it and blocked the number. Whatever he wanted, whatever he had to say, she didn't care anymore. She had just secured her future. She had just proven that she didn't need him, had never needed him, and would build something extraordinary without him. The divorce papers were still in her car. Tomorrow she would sign them without contest. Let him have what he thought he wanted. She had something better: freedom, success, and a future he couldn't touch. 3 years earlier, Imani had started Richardson Biotech Consulting in a shared office space with 2 employees and a dream. Derek had laughed when she told him about it over dinner. "That's cute, babe," he had said, not looking up from his phone. "Just don't let it interfere with your real responsibilities." By real responsibilities, he meant cooking his meals, managing his social calendar, and looking good at his company events. She had smiled and nodded, letting him believe what he wanted to believe. That was the beginning of her double life. During the day, while Derek worked at his mid-level finance job and thought she was attending MBA classes or running errands, Imani was building. She was networking with hospital administrators and pharmaceutical executives. She was writing proposals and pitching services. She was solving problems that multi-billion-dollar companies couldn't solve themselves. Her breakthrough came during her second year of business school when she developed a proprietary system for managing clinical trial data that reduced processing time by 40%. A small biotech company took a chance on her, and when she delivered results that exceeded projections, word spread. Then came the referrals. Then came the contracts. Then came the expansion. Dr. Patricia Holmes had been her professor in strategic management and quickly became her mentor and business partner. Patricia had spent 30 years in the pharmaceutical industry before retiring to teach, and she knew everyone worth knowing. When Imani pitched her the idea of joining forces, Patricia had agreed immediately. "You have vision," Patricia had told her, "and you have drive. But you're also married to a man who will try to take credit for your success the moment he realizes it exists. Be smart about how you structure this." Imani had been smart. She had created an LLC with Patricia as the majority stakeholder on paper, keeping her own name minimal in the early documents. She had kept separate bank accounts. She had paid for her MBA tuition from company profits while Derek thought she was taking out student loans. She had bought their house through the company's real estate holdings, putting it in a trust that Derek never bothered to read about. He signed where she told him to sign, never asking questions, always assuming she was just handling household paperwork. 6 months ago, she had discovered the affair by accident. She had come home early from a business trip to find Brooke's earrings on the bathroom counter. Not her earrings. Not anything she would ever wear. When she confronted Derek, he didn't even try to deny it. He said he was bored, and that Imani was always busy with school or that business thing, and didn't pay attention to him anymore. She had stared at him, this man she had married at 23, and realized she felt nothing. Not anger. Not sadness. Just a cold, clear certainty that this marriage was over and had been over for a long time. But she didn't scream or throw things or demand he leave. Instead, she said, "We'll talk about this later," and went to sleep in the guest room. The next morning, she called Margaret, the best divorce lawyer in the city, and laid out her situation. Then she called a private investigator. Then she went to work on the Sterling Pharmaceuticals deal with renewed focus because she knew exactly what was coming and she needed to be ready. For 6 months, she played the role of the unsuspecting wife while the investigator documented everything. Derek's hotel visits with Brooke. The money he withdrew from their joint account to buy her gifts. The emails he sent from his work computer, stupid enough to use company servers for personal affairs. Imani collected it all like evidence for a trial because that's exactly what it would be. She also accelerated her business timeline. The Sterling deal had been in negotiation for months, but she pushed harder. She made concessions she normally wouldn't make. She agreed to shorter timelines and tighter margins because she needed this deal closed before Derek realized what was happening. She needed the money secured, the contracts signed, the papers filed with the state showing Richardson Biotech Consulting as a legitimate, thriving company worth millions. Her graduation was supposed to be the finish line. She would get her MBA, close the deal, and then divorce Derek on her terms, with her money protected and her future secured. But Derek had moved faster than she expected. He must have sensed something changing because he had filed first, probably thinking he could claim half of whatever little business she had before she got too successful. He had no idea he was already too late. As Imani sat in her office the evening after closing the Sterling deal, looking out over the city lights, she reviewed the timeline in her mind. Tomorrow morning the news would break. Business journals would report the deal. Her company's valuation would triple overnight. Derek would see his name nowhere in the success story because he had contributed nothing to it. Nicole knocked on her door. "Ms. Richardson? There's a call for you on line 3. He says he's your husband." "Ex-husband," Imani corrected. "And I'm not taking his calls. Block that number too." Nicole nodded and left. Imani turned back to the window. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Champagne tomorrow to celebrate properly. You've earned this, my dear. Every single bit of it." Imani smiled. She had earned it. Through sleepless nights and endless negotiations. Through balancing school and building a company while pretending to be the dutiful wife to a man who never saw her clearly. Through staying calm when she wanted to scream, strategic when she wanted to react, patient when she wanted to burn everything down. The divorce papers sat on her desk, still unsigned. She picked them up and read through them again. Derek wanted the house, which was funny because he didn't own it. He wanted half of their assets, which was funnier because most of their assets were actually her assets held in structures he didn't understand. He wanted alimony, which was hilarious because his income had always been higher than what he thought hers was. Tomorrow, Margaret would respond to his filing with a counterproposal that would shatter his illusions completely. They would present the evidence of his affair. They would show the money he had stolen from their joint account. They would demonstrate that the house, the car, the investments he thought were joint property were actually owned by Imani's company. They would offer him exactly nothing except a quick, quiet divorce if he didn't contest. Imani signed the papers on her end, her signature firm and clear. Then she placed them in an envelope for Margaret to file. She was done playing games. She was done pretending. She was done being underestimated. Derek had thrown away 7 years of marriage for a pregnant girlfriend who would leave him the moment his money ran out. Imani had spent those same 7 years building something that would last decades. She knew who had made the better investment. She turned off the lights in her office and headed home to the guest house she had been renting for the past month, the one Derek didn't know about because he never asked where she was sleeping these days. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she would rest knowing that she had won the battle before Derek even realized there was a war. The morning after closing the Sterling deal, Imani woke at 5:30 to her phone exploding with notifications. The news had broken faster than expected. Bloomberg had run the story first. Richardson Biotech Consulting secures $450 million contract with Sterling Pharmaceuticals. Forbes followed with an analysis piece. The Wall Street Journal mentioned it in their business briefing. By 6 o'clock, her LinkedIn profile had 500 new connection requests. She lay in bed scrolling through the coverage, watching her professional life transform in real time. Every article mentioned her name. Every piece highlighted her innovative approach to clinical trial management. Several noted that she had just completed her MBA while running a multimillion-dollar company. Not one mentioned Derek. Her phone rang. It was Margaret. "Have you seen the news?" her lawyer asked. "I'm reading it now." "Good. Then you should know Derek called my office 17 times yesterday evening and showed up at the reception this morning demanding to see me. I had security remove him." Imani sat up. "What does he want?" "To stop the divorce. He claims it was filed in error, that you two need to work things out, that he's willing to go to counseling. It's pathetic, honestly." "Tell him no." "I already did. I also informed him that we'll be filing our response today, and that if he contests anything, we'll make the evidence of his affair public record." That shut him up quickly. "And Brooke?" Margaret laughed. According to my sources, she's been calling him nonstop since the news broke, asking why he told her you were broke and struggling. Apparently, she's reevaluating some life choices. Imani felt a grim satisfaction. File the response. I want this done. She ended the call and got ready for work. Today was going to be intense. She had meetings scheduled with Sterling's transition team, calls with potential new clients who had seen the news, and a company-wide celebration Patricia had insisted on organizing. She dressed in a navy suit, pulled her hair into a sleek bun, and drove to the office. The moment she walked through the doors, her staff erupted in applause. 23 employees, the team she had built from nothing, cheering and celebrating. Nicole had decorated the lobby with balloons and a banner that read, "We did it." Someone had brought pastries. The junior analysts were already popping bottles of sparkling cider. Speech, someone called out. Imani laughed and held up her hands. I'm not good at speeches without preparation, but I'll try. 3 years ago, this company was just an idea. Today, we're partners with one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. But this success isn't mine alone. It belongs to every person in this room who took a chance on something new, who worked late nights and early mornings, who believed we could compete with firms 10 times our size. You proved them wrong. We proved them wrong. And this is just the beginning. More applause. More cheers. Patricia appeared at her elbow with actual champagne. Just one glass, she said. Then we have work to do. They toasted together, and Imani let herself enjoy the moment. She had earned this. They all had. By noon, her phone was ringing constantly. Reporters wanted interviews. Investors wanted meetings. Competitors wanted to know how she had pulled off such a major contract. She delegated most of it to her communications team, but she agreed to one interview with a business podcast that had been following her company for the past year. The host, a woman named Rachel, got straight to the point. Imani, this deal seems to have come out of nowhere for most people. How long have you been working on it? 8 months of direct negotiation, but we've been building toward this for 3 years. Sterling needed a partner who could innovate quickly and deliver results reliably. We proved we could do both. You've mentioned in past interviews that you were completing your MBA while running the company. That must have been challenging. It was worth it. The education gave me frameworks to think bigger and tools to execute better. I wouldn't have this success without that foundation. And what's next for Richardson Biotech Consulting? Imani paused. She had been thinking about this question all morning. We're going to keep solving problems that other people think are impossible. We're going to expand our services, hire more talent, and prove that innovation doesn't have to come from legacy firms. We're going to change how this industry works. After the interview, she returned to her office to find Derek waiting outside her building. Security had stopped him at the door, but he was visible through the glass, pacing and agitated. She called down to the front desk. Ms. Richardson, the security guard said. There's a man here claiming to be your husband. Should I remove him? Yes. And add him to the no-access list permanently. She watched from her window as security escorted Derek out. He was shouting, gesturing wildly, but she couldn't hear the words and didn't care to. Whatever he had to say, it was too late. The divorce would be final in a matter of weeks. The Sterling deal was signed. Her company was valued at $75 million as of this morning's assessments. She had built something he couldn't touch, couldn't claim, couldn't diminish. That evening, Patricia took her to dinner at an upscale restaurant overlooking the harbor. They sat by the window, champagne in hand, and Patricia raised her glass. To the most impressive woman I know, Patricia said, who turned betrayal into fuel and built an empire while everyone underestimated her. To partnership, Imani replied. I couldn't have done this without you. You could have, Patricia said. But I'm glad you didn't have to. They talked about expansion plans and hiring strategies. They discussed which contracts to pursue next and which to let go. They planned for the future like generals plotting victory after victory. By the time dessert arrived, Imani felt something she hadn't felt in months. Genuine happiness. Her phone buzzed. Another text from an unknown number. She was about to block it when she saw the preview. This is Brooke. We need to talk about Derek. Imani showed Patricia the message. Don't respond, Patricia advised. Whatever she wants, it's not your problem. I know, Imani said, deleting the message. I just find it funny that she thinks we have anything to discuss. She's probably realizing he has no money and wondering if you might help them out of the goodness of your heart. My heart is focused on business right now. It has no room for charity cases. Patricia laughed. Good. Keep it that way. They finished dinner and parted ways. Imani drove back to her guest house, stopping at the mailbox to collect letters. Among the bills and junk mail was an envelope from the courthouse. She opened it in the car. The divorce filing had been updated. Derek had agreed to her terms without contest. No alimony. No division of assets. Just a clean break and mutual non-disclosure. Margaret had added a note. He saw the evidence. He knows he has no leverage. It's over. Imani sat in her car, holding the papers, and felt a weight lift from her shoulders. 7 years of marriage, ended in a legal document that took less than a minute to read. It should have felt sadder. It should have hurt more. But all she felt was relief and anticipation for what came next. She had closed the biggest deal of her life and ended her marriage on the same day. Tomorrow she would start building the next chapter, and this time no one would underestimate her again. Derek Anderson had always thought of himself as smart. Clever, even. He had a finance degree from a decent state school, a management position at a respectable firm, and enough charm to get what he wanted from most people. But sitting in his cramped apartment, Brooke's apartment technically since he had moved out of the house 2 weeks ago, staring at his laptop screen, he realized he might have made the biggest mistake of his life. The Bloomberg article was still open in one tab. Forbes was in another. LinkedIn in a third, where his former colleagues were congratulating Imani on her success and pointedly not mentioning him at all. He had called everyone he knew in the business world trying to understand how this had happened. How had his wife, the woman he thought was barely scraping by with a small consulting gig, secured a $450 million contract? Are you even listening to me? Brooke's voice cut through his thoughts. He looked up. She was standing in the doorway, her hands on her hips, her pregnant belly prominent under a tight dress. She had been beautiful when they started their affair. Young, eager, impressed by his junior management title. Now she just looked angry all the time. I'm listening, he lied. I said, when are we going to talk about our future? The baby is due in 4 months. We need a bigger place. We need health insurance. We need a plan. Derek rubbed his face. I'm working on it. You've been working on it for weeks. You said the divorce would be simple, that Imani had nothing, that we'd get the house and move on. But now everyone is saying she's rich. Is that true? It's complicated. Uncomplicated, Derek. Did you lie to me about your wife having money? He had. Of course he had. He had told Brooke that Imani was broke, that her business was failing, that they were living off his salary. He had told her the house was his, that the cars were his, that everything would be theirs once the divorce was final. He had believed it himself. I didn't know, he said finally. She never told me about any of this. She kept it hidden. How do you hide a $450 million deal? I don't know. He slammed his laptop shut. She was always busy with school or meetings, but I thought it was just MBA stuff. I thought she was building some small consulting thing on the side. I had no idea it was this big. Brooke crossed her arms. So what does that mean for us? It means the divorce is going to be more complicated than I thought. Can't you get half? You were married for 7 years. That's got to count for something. Derek had thought the same thing. That's why he had filed quickly, hoping to catch Imani before she got too successful. But then Margaret, Imani's lawyer, had called him personally yesterday and laid out some very uncomfortable facts. The house wasn't his. It was owned by something called the Richardson Holdings Trust, established 4 years ago. Imani was the beneficiary. He had signed papers agreeing to live there rent-free, papers he didn't remember signing but that had his signature all over them. The cars weren't his, leased through the same trust. The investments he thought were joint accounts were actually Imani's individual accounts that he had been allowed to see statements for but had no legal claim to. And then there was the other issue. The private investigator had documented everything. The hotels. The gifts he had bought Brooke with money from the joint checking account, the only account he actually had access to. The emails. Margaret had made it very clear. If he contested the divorce or asked for anything, all of that evidence would become public record. His company would find out. His parents would find out. His professional reputation would be destroyed. Derek. Brooke's voice was sharper now. What does it mean for us? It means I get nothing, he said quietly. What? She structured everything so I have no legal claim to any of it. And if I fight her on it, she'll make the affair public. My company has a morality clause in management contracts. I could lose my job. Brooke stared at him. You told me you were getting the house. I thought I was. You told me we'd be comfortable. I thought we would be. You told me she was broke. I thought she was. Derek stood up, his frustration boiling over. How was I supposed to know she was building a company worth millions while pretending to be a struggling MBA student? She lied to me. Or you just never paid attention, Brooke shot back. Did you ever ask about her business? Did you ever go to her office? Did you ever show any interest in what she was doing? He hadn't. He knew he hadn't. Imani had mentioned meetings and clients and proposals, but he had tuned it out. It was easier to think of her business as a hobby, something she did to feel important while he was the real breadwinner. Except now it turned out she had been the breadwinner all along, and he had been too blind to notice. His phone rang. It was his mother. He declined the call. She had already left 3 voicemails asking about the news, and whether it was true that Imani was some kind of business mogul now. His parents had always loved Imani. His mother had cried when he told her about the divorce, asking what he had done to drive away such a wonderful woman. When she found out about Brooke and the pregnancy, she had stopped speaking to him entirely. So what now? Brooke asked. Now I sign the divorce papers and move on. That's it? You're just giving up? What choice do I have? If I fight, I lose my job. If I fight, everyone finds out about us. The affair, the money I spent on you, all of it. My career would be over. Brooke was quiet for a long moment. How much do you make a year? 85,000. Why? That's it. Derek felt something cold settle in his stomach. What do you mean that's it? I mean, you told me you made 6 figures. You told me you were on track to make partner. You told me we'd have a good life. 85,000 is good money. Your wife just closed a deal worth $450 million, Derek. 85,000 is nothing. She's not my wife anymore. Exactly. Brooke picked up her purse from the counter. I need to think about things. Think about what? About whether this is what I want. You're not who I thought you were. The house isn't yours. The money isn't yours. Even your marriage was apparently a lie because you didn't even know what your own wife was doing. I need space. She walked out, slamming the door behind her. Derek stood in the empty apartment, the silence crushing. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts, looking for someone to call, someone who might understand or help or just listen. But most of his friends had been their friends, couples they hung out with, and they had all sided with Imani after the divorce announcement. His work colleagues were distant, probably already gossiping about his failed marriage and his affair. His family wasn't speaking to him. He opened his email and typed a message to Imani. We need to talk. Please. I made a mistake. Can we meet? He stared at it for 5 minutes before deleting it unsent. She wouldn't respond. Why would she? He had humiliated her at her graduation. He had cheated on her for months. He had filed for divorce thinking he could take half of what she built. And she had let him believe his own lies right up until the moment his world fell apart. Derek closed his laptop and looked around Brooke's apartment. Small. Cramped. Furniture from discount stores. This was his life now. This was what he had chosen when he threw away his marriage for someone younger and the illusion of excitement. His phone buzzed with a news alert. Another article about Imani and Richardson Biotech Consulting. Another piece celebrating her success. Another reminder that while he was falling apart, she was rising higher than he ever imagined possible. He had thought he was the smart one, the successful one, the one who deserved more than a wife who was always working. But he had been wrong about everything. And now he was alone with nothing to show for 7 years except regret and the growing realization that he had destroyed the best thing in his life for absolutely nothing. Margaret Chen's office was located in a steel and glass building downtown, the kind of place that screamed expensive legal expertise. Imani sat across from her lawyer, watching as Margaret organized documents into neat stacks on the polished conference table. It had been 2 weeks since the Sterling deal closed, 2 weeks since Derek had agreed to the divorce terms, and now they were finalizing everything before the court date. He signed without contest, Margaret said, sliding the papers across to Imani. No alimony. No asset division. Clean break. You just need to review and initial here, here, and here. Imani scanned the documents. Everything was as they had discussed. The house remained in the Richardson Holdings Trust. The cars, the investments, the business assets, all untouched. Derek walked away with his personal belongings, his car, and his pride in tatters. What about the evidence? Imani asked. The affair documentation? Sealed with the agreement. As long as he doesn't violate the non-disclosure clause or contest the divorce, it stays private. If he breaks either condition, we can release it. And Brooke? Margaret's expression hardened. The private investigator compiled a full report. 53 hotel visits over 6 months. $17,000 withdrawn from your joint checking account and spent on gifts for her. Email evidence showing Derek using company resources to conduct the affair. Text messages discussing their plans to get pregnant to force your hand. It's comprehensive. Imani felt nothing as she listened. Not anger, not pain, just a clinical detachment. These were facts, evidence, proof of betrayal. But they belonged to a version of her life that was over now. I want copies of everything, she said. For what purpose? Insurance. In case he decides to tell a different story later. Margaret nodded and made a note. Smart. I'll have everything sent to you in a secure file. She paused. There's one more thing you should know. Derek's employer conducted an internal investigation after rumors of the affair started circulating. They found evidence he was using company time and resources for personal matters, including the affair. He's been demoted. Demoted. From junior management back to analyst level. 30% pay cut. His boss apparently took a dim view of the situation, especially after learning about the pregnancy and the divorce circumstances. Imani absorbed this information. She hadn't sought to damage Derek's career, but she couldn't say she felt sorry for him either. Actions had consequences. He was learning that now. And Brooke? Imani asked again. Margaret smiled slightly. According to my sources, she ended the relationship 3 days ago. Moved back in with her parents. Apparently, the reality of Derek's actual financial situation didn't match what he had told her. She thought he had money. She thought he was about to have a lot of money from the divorce settlement. When she realized he was getting nothing and had been demoted, she left. Some people are very practical about their romantic choices. Imani signed the last of the documents and pushed them back across the table. When is the court date? 2 weeks. It's a formality at this point. The judge will review the agreement, confirm both parties' consent, and grant the divorce. You don't even have to be there if you don't want to be. I can represent you. I'll be there, Imani said. I want to see it finished. After leaving Margaret's office, Imani drove to the Richardson Biotech Consulting headquarters. The company had moved to a larger space last month, a full floor in a premium building with views of the city skyline. The expansion had been necessary. They had hired 12 new employees in the past 2 weeks alone, and more offers were going out daily. Nicole met her at the elevator with a tablet and her usual efficient smile. Ms. Richardson, you have 3 calls to return, a meeting with the Sterling transition team at 2, and Dr. Holmes wants to see you when you have a moment. Tell Patricia I'll come to her office now. Push the calls to tomorrow and confirm the Sterling meeting. Imani found Patricia in her corner office, reviewing contracts. Her mentor looked up and gestured to the chair across from her desk. How did it go with Margaret? Patricia asked. It's done. Court date in 2 weeks, then it's official. How are you feeling? Imani considered the question. Relieved. Ready to move forward. A little tired of thinking about Derek at all. That's healthy. You've handled this with remarkable composure. Most people would have fallen apart. Falling apart wasn't an option. I had too much to lose. Patricia nodded approvingly. Speaking of what you've built, I wanted to talk to you about the next phase. We've had inquiries from 4 major pharmaceutical companies about similar partnerships to the Sterling deal. We could potentially close 3 more contracts of comparable size within the next year if we scale correctly. That fast. Your reputation is gold right now, Imani. The industry is watching. Everyone wants what Sterling has. But we need to expand carefully. More staff, better infrastructure, potentially opening regional offices. I've drafted a growth plan for your review. They spent the next hour discussing expansion strategies. Patricia's plan was aggressive but logical. Hire specialists in regulatory compliance, open an office in Boston to serve East Coast clients, invest in proprietary software development to strengthen their competitive advantage. The projections showed the company reaching a valuation of $200 million within 18 months. This is ambitious, Imani said, reviewing the numbers. You're ambitious. That's why it works. But you'll need to stay focused. No distractions. Imani knew what Patricia meant. No time for dwelling on the divorce, no energy wasted on Derek or Brooke or any of it. Just forward momentum. I can do that, she said. That evening, Imani returned to the house for the first time in weeks. Derek had moved out completely, taking his clothes and personal items and leaving everything else. She walked through the rooms, seeing them with fresh eyes. This had been their home, but it had never really felt like theirs. It had always been hers, purchased with her money, furnished with her choices, maintained through her effort while Derek just existed in it. She found a bottle of wine in the kitchen, poured a glass, and sat on the back patio watching the sunset. Her phone buzzed with messages, congratulations from business contacts, meeting requests, interview inquiries. She ignored them all for the moment and just sat with her thoughts. 7 years of marriage reduced to legal documents and evidence files. 7 years of trying to make it work, of believing Derek would eventually see her, appreciate her, support her. 7 years of being wrong. But those same 7 years had also taught her resilience. They had taught her to trust herself, to build something that couldn't be taken away, to protect what mattered. In a strange way, Derek's betrayal had freed her. If he hadn't cheated, she might have stayed in the marriage out of obligation or comfort. She might have continued pretending everything was fine while her potential withered. Instead, she had built an empire. She had proven her worth not just to him but to herself. She had transformed pain into power and betrayal into fuel for success. Her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. She almost declined it, then decided to answer. Hello? Imani? It's Derek's mother, Susan. Imani sat up straighter. She hadn't spoken to Susan since before the divorce filing. Hi, Susan. I wanted to call and apologize. For my son. For everything he did to you. I raised him better than this, and I'm ashamed of his behavior. You don't need to apologize for him. Maybe not, but I want you to know I think he's a fool. I saw the news about your company. I'm so proud of you. You always were too good for him. Imani felt unexpected emotion tighten her throat. Thank you. I also wanted you to know that his father and I have cut him off financially. We told him he needs to face the consequences of his choices. That girl he got pregnant left him, did you know? I heard. Good. She was using him just like he used you. Except you actually loved him and he threw it away. I hope you find someone who deserves you, Imani. You deserve the world. After they ended the call, Imani sat in the gathering darkness and let herself cry. Not for Derek, not for the marriage, but for the version of herself who had tried so hard to make it work. That woman was gone now, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more capable. The evidence files sat in her email, proof of betrayal and lies. But she didn't need them anymore. The truth was already clear. She had won not by fighting dirty but by building. Something so successful that Derek's actions became irrelevant. His cheating, his attempts to take what wasn't his whole petty scheme. None of it mattered because she was already so far beyond him that he couldn't touch her even if he tried. Imani finished her wine, locked up the house, and drove back to her guest house. In 2 weeks, the divorce would be final. In 2 weeks, she would be free to focus entirely on the future. And that future looked brighter than anything she had imagined when she was sitting in that graduation ceremony, divorce papers in hand, wondering if she had the strength to keep going. She had been strong enough. She had always been strong enough. And now everyone knew it. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Imani stood on a stage in New York City accepting the Businesswoman of the Year award from the National Women in Business Association. The ballroom was filled with 500 industry leaders, investors, and media representatives. Her company had just closed its second major contract, this time with Apex Therapeutics for $680 million over 4 years. Richardson Biotech Consulting now employed 72 people across 3 offices and had a valuation of $300 million. When I started this company 3 years ago, Imani said into the microphone, I had 2 employees, 1 client, and a lot of people who thought I was crazy to try competing with established firms. Today, we're proof that innovation, dedication, and strategic thinking can disrupt even the most traditional industries. But this award isn't just mine. It belongs to every person who took a chance on Richardson Biotech, every employee who believed in our vision, and every client who trusted us to deliver results. Thank you. The applause was thunderous. As she walked off stage, holding the Crystal Award, she was immediately surrounded by journalists and executives wanting to congratulate her, ask questions, propose partnerships. Patricia appeared at her elbow, expertly guiding her through the crowd to a quieter corner. You handled that beautifully, Patricia said. I've had practice. This is the 4th award this quarter. And you deserve every one. Have you seen the latest analyst reports? They're predicting we'll be worth over $1 billion within 2 years if we maintain this trajectory. Imani had seen the reports. She had also seen the acquisition offers. 3 major consulting firms and 2 private equity groups had approached her about buying Richardson Biotech. She had declined them all. This company was hers, built from nothing, and she wasn't ready to hand it over to anyone else. Her phone buzzed. A text from Nicole. Derek is trying to get into the event. Security has him at the door. What should I do? Imani showed the message to Patricia. He's here? Patricia's expression darkened. Apparently. Trying to get in. Do you want me to handle it? No. I'll take care of it. Imani excused herself and walked to the ballroom entrance. Through the glass doors, she could see Derek arguing with a security guard, gesturing animatedly. He looked different, thinner, tired, his suit slightly rumpled. She pushed through the door. Ms. Richardson, the security guard said, relieved. This man claims he knows you. I do know him, Imani said calmly. But he's not on the guest list. Please escort him out. Derek turned to her. Imani, please. I just want to talk to you for 5 minutes. No. I made mistakes. I know that. But you can't just cut me out completely. We were married for 7 years. Were. Past tense. Now we're nothing. You made your choices, Derek. Live with them. I lost everything because of you. You lost everything because of you, Imani corrected. You cheated. You stole money from our account. You tried to claim assets that weren't yours. You humiliated me at my graduation. Every consequence you're facing is the result of your own actions. You could help me. You have so much now. You could give me a job, a loan, something. I'm barely making it. Imani stared at him. 6 months ago, this conversation might have hurt. She might have felt guilt or obligation. Now she just felt tired of his presence. You're not my responsibility. You never were, apparently, since you were so focused on yourself that you didn't even notice me building a company worth hundreds of millions. Security, please remove him. As the guard escorted Derek away, he shouted back at her. This isn't over. You think you're so successful now, but I know the truth. You hid money from me. You manipulated everything. Imani watched him go, then turned back to the ballroom. Several people had witnessed the scene, but she held her head high as she returned to the event. Patricia was waiting with champagne. Was that necessary? Patricia asked quietly. Completely. He needed to understand that begging won't work, threats won't work, and I'm not interested in his version of the story. Now everyone here knows it too. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of networking and celebration. Imani spoke with potential clients, posed for photos, gave an impromptu interview to a business magazine. By the time the event ended, she was exhausted but satisfied. Back in her hotel suite, she kicked off her heels and collapsed on the couch. The award sat on the table, catching light from the city skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She had come so far in such a short time. From the humiliation of that graduation ceremony to this moment, standing on a stage accepting recognition for her achievements. Her phone rang. An unknown number again. She was about to decline when she decided to answer. Hello? Ms. Richardson? This is Thomas Burton from Sterling Pharmaceuticals. I apologize for calling so late. Mr. Burton. Is everything all right with the contract? Better than all right. I'm calling because I was at the award ceremony tonight. I saw what happened with that man who tried to get in. Imani closed her eyes. Of course he had seen. I want you to know, Thomas continued, that it impressed me. You handled a difficult personal situation with grace and firmness. Those are qualities we value in our partners. I'm calling to inform you that Sterling wants to expand our contract. We're prepared to add another $200 million for additional services. I'll have my team send over the proposal tomorrow. After the call ended, Imani sat in stunned silence. Derek's attempt to embarrass her had backfired completely, resulting instead in an even bigger deal. She laughed, the sound echoing in the empty suite. Everything he touched turned to disaster for him and success for her. The next morning, business news outlets ran stories about the awards ceremony. Most focused on her speech and her company's growth. A few mentioned the disruption outside the ballroom, describing it as an unnamed individual attempting to gain access, without identifying Derek. Imani's team had handled the narrative perfectly. By the time she returned to her office the following week, the Sterling expansion was signed and 3 new client inquiries had come in. Her calendar was booked solid for the next 2 months with meetings, conferences, and speaking engagements. The company was hiring at record pace, and Patricia had started planning for an international expansion into European markets. Imani reviewed the growth metrics with her executive team. 72 employees would become 100 within a quarter. 3 offices would become 5. $300 million valuation would likely hit $500 million by year end. They were on track to become one of the largest independent biotech consulting firms in the world. It's almost overwhelming, Nicole said during a break in the meeting. A year ago we were celebrating the Sterling deal. Now we're talking about European offices and billion-dollar valuations. It's not overwhelming, Imani said. It's what we planned for. Every step has been strategic and intentional. We're just executing the vision. That evening, as Imani drove home, to the house she now lived in alone, fully paid off and entirely hers, she reflected on the past 6 months. Derek was struggling in a demoted position, living in a small apartment, abandoned by Brooke and his parents. She was thriving, building, succeeding beyond even her own ambitious goals. Some people would call it revenge. Imani called it consequences. She hadn't destroyed Derek's life. She had simply built her own so successfully that his attempts to diminish her had become laughably irrelevant. His affair, his divorce filing, his attempts to claim what wasn't his, none of it had stopped her. If anything, it had motivated her to move faster, reach higher, prove more decisively that she was capable of extraordinary things. The best revenge wasn't destroying your enemies. It was building a life so magnificent that their actions became footnotes in a much larger success story. Derek would always be the man who divorced Imani Richardson on her graduation day, unaware she was about to close a $450 million deal. That was his legacy now. And hers was still being written, one achievement at a time. 8 months after the divorce, Imani attended the Global Biotech Summit in San Francisco. The 3-day conference brought together industry leaders, investors, and innovators from around the world. Richardson Biotech Consulting was a platinum sponsor, and Imani was scheduled to deliver a keynote address on the second day about disrupting traditional pharmaceutical partnerships. She arrived at the conference hotel the evening before her speech, checked into her suite, and headed to the welcome reception. The ballroom was crowded with familiar faces and new ones. She spent the first hour networking, discussing industry trends, fielding questions about her company's rapid growth. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Ms. Richardson? I come here when I need a break from the tech world. Nobody talks about funding rounds or market disruption. They just eat good food and enjoy the moment. Over the next 2 hours, they talked about everything except business. Julian told her about growing up in Seattle, his degree in molecular biology before switching to finance, his love of sailing. Imani found herself sharing stories about her childhood in Atlanta, her decision to pursue business instead of medicine like her parents wanted, her passion for solving complex problems. Can I ask you something personal? Julian said over dessert. Depends on the question. The articles about you never mention your divorce directly, but I know it happened around the time of the Sterling deal. That must have been difficult timing. Imani appreciated that he was direct. My ex-husband filed for divorce on my graduation day. Same day the Sterling deal closed. He thought I was broke and wanted to claim half of what he believed was nothing. Turned out to be very different from what he expected. That's awful. I'm sorry you went through that. I'm not. It freed me to focus completely on building something that mattered. If he hadn't shown his true character, I might have stayed in that marriage for years out of obligation. Still, it takes strength to handle that kind of betrayal and still close the biggest deal of your career on the same day. I didn't have a choice. The deal was too important to let personal drama derail it. Julian looked at her thoughtfully. You know what I find most impressive about you? It's not the deals or the valuation or the awards, though those are remarkable. It's that you turned a devastating situation into fuel for extraordinary success. Most people would have fallen apart. You built an empire instead. I had good mentors and a clear vision. That helped. You also had yourself. Don't minimize that. They talked until the restaurant was preparing to close. Julian walked her back to her hotel, and they stood in the lobby for a moment. I'd like to see you again, he said. When you're back in the city or when I'm wherever you are. No pressure, but I enjoyed tonight. I enjoyed it too, Imani admitted. I'm usually so focused on work that I forget there's anything else. Work is important, but so is connection. Balance. He kissed her cheek gently and left. Imani went up to her suite feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not business hope or strategic hope, but personal hope that maybe, eventually, she could have both professional success and genuine connection with someone who saw her clearly. Over the next 2 months, she and Julian saw each other whenever their schedules aligned. Dinner in Boston when she was meeting with potential East Coast clients. A weekend in Napa when they both needed a break. Coffee meetings that turned into long conversations about philosophy, ambition, the balance between building something meaningful and actually living life. Julian was different from Derek in every way that mattered. He asked about her work with genuine interest. He celebrated her successes without jealousy. He had his own ambitions and accomplishments, so he didn't feel threatened by hers. He made her laugh. He challenged her thinking. He respected her boundaries. "I'm not looking to rush into anything," Imani told him one evening over dinner in her city. "Neither am I," Julian said. "We're both building careers that matter to us. Let's just see where this goes naturally." 3 months after their first dinner, Julian attended a Richardson biotech company event as Imani's guest. Patricia met him and gave Imani an approving nod later. "He's good for you," Patricia said. "He doesn't try to diminish you or compete with you. He just enjoys who you are. It's still early, maybe, but it's nice to see you happy about something other than closing deals." Imani realized Patricia was right. She was happy. Not just about the company's success or the awards or the growing valuation. She was happy because for the first time in years, she was allowing herself to be more than just her work. She was allowing herself to be seen and appreciated as a whole person. Derek had texted her once during this time, asking if they could talk. She had blocked his number without responding. That chapter was closed. She was writing new ones now, and they were infinitely better than anything that had come before. Derek Anderson scrolled through LinkedIn for the third time that day, reading the latest post about Imani. She had been featured in Fortune magazine's 40 Under 40 list. The article called her a visionary disruptor transforming pharmaceutical partnerships, and included a photo of her standing in front of her company's headquarters, looking confident and successful in a sharp black suit. Hundreds of congratulations from industry leaders, former classmates, business contacts. Not one mentioned him. It was like their 7-year marriage had been erased from her history completely. His phone buzzed. Another bill. Another reminder of how far he had fallen. The apartment he rented now was in a bad part of town, the best he could afford on his reduced salary. The demotion had cost him more than income. It had cost him respect, opportunities, and any hope of advancement. Word had spread about why he was demoted, and now nobody in finance would touch him. Brooke had been right about one thing. $85,000 wasn't enough, especially after taxes and child support. Yes, child support. Even though Brooke had ended their relationship and married some regional manager at her company within 4 months, Derek was still on the hook for supporting the child he had never even met. Brooke had made sure of that. His parents still weren't speaking to him. His mother had sent one email after the divorce was finalized. "You threw away the best thing that ever happened to you for nothing. Don't contact us until you've figured out how to be a decent human being." He had tried reaching out to former colleagues, hoping to network his way into a better position. Most ignored his messages. A few responded politely but vaguely, making it clear they wanted nothing to do with him. The finance world was smaller than people thought, and his reputation had preceded him everywhere. That's when he had the idea. A terrible, desperate idea, but he was running out of options. If he couldn't rebuild his career through legitimate means, maybe he could use Imani's success to his advantage. After all, people were interested in her story. What if he told his side? What if he positioned himself as the supportive husband who had helped her build Richardson Biotech, only to be cast aside when she became successful? He started drafting a social media post. Something sympathetic. Something that would make people question Imani's character and maybe, just maybe, give him some relevance again. He wrote, "Nobody talks about the sacrifices behind success. I supported my ex-wife through business school and the early days of her company, believing in her when nobody else did. Now that she's successful, I've been written out of the story entirely. It hurts to be forgotten by someone you helped build up. Hashtag the other side of success, hashtag behind every successful woman." He posted it and waited. Within an hour, it had 200 likes. Within 2 hours, it had been shared 50 times. Calling Imani ungrateful, questioning her character. Derek felt a sick satisfaction. Finally, people were paying attention to him again. Then the tide turned. A business journalist named Sarah Chen had been following Imani's story and had done her research. She quote-tweeted Derek's post with receipts. Interesting claim from Derek Anderson. Public records show: 1. Richardson Biotech was founded 3 years before his divorce filing. 2. He was never an employee or investor. 3. Court documents show he attempted to claim assets he didn't own. 4. He was demoted from his job due to ethics violations. This isn't being written out of a story. This is facing consequences for his own actions. The tweet went viral. Within hours, other journalists piled on, sharing details about the divorce that Derek had hoped would stay buried. Someone found and shared the graduation day divorce papers story. Another found evidence of the affair with Brooke. A former colleague anonymously confirmed the demotion was due to using company resources for personal matters. Derek's phone exploded with notifications, but now they were all negative. People were calling him out for trying to take credit for Imani's success. They were pointing out his manipulative attempt to rewrite history. They were sharing articles about the actual timeline of Richardson Biotech's founding, showing he had nothing to do with it. Then Imani's team responded. Not Imani herself. She clearly wasn't going to dignify his post with a personal response, but her communications director released a brief statement to the business press. Ms. Richardson built Richardson Biotech Consulting independently, with support from her mentor Dr. Patricia Holmes and a dedicated team of employees. The company's success is the result of years of strategic planning, innovative thinking, and hard work by dozens of talented individuals. Any claims to the contrary are demonstrably false. The statement was professional, factual, and devastating. It didn't attack Derek personally but made it absolutely clear that he had contributed nothing to Imani's success. Within 24 hours, Derek's post had become infamous for all the wrong reasons. Business websites were writing articles about how not to handle your ex's success. Career advisors were using him as an example of burning bridges. Even his former company released a statement distancing themselves from his claims. His phone rang. It was his lawyer, the one who had handled the divorce. Derek, what were you thinking? Do you have any idea how much damage you just did to yourself? I was just trying to tell my side of the story. Your side of the story is documented in court records showing you cheated, stole money, and tried to claim assets that weren't yours. And now you've reminded everyone of that publicly. I'm getting calls from journalists asking if they can access the divorce files. If this continues, your entire settlement agreement could be voided and everything could become public record. Derek's stomach dropped. What do I do? Delete the post. Issue an apology. And for God's sake, stop talking about Imani Richardson. Derek deleted the post with shaking hands, but the damage was done. Screenshots had already circulated. News articles had already been written. His attempt to ride Imani's success had backfired spectacularly, making him look even worse than before. That evening, sitting alone in his cramped apartment, Derek finally understood the depth of his mistake. Not just the social media post, but everything. Every choice that had led him to this moment. He had taken Imani for granted. He had cheated because he was bored, not because she wasn't enough. He had filed for divorce thinking he was getting ahead of her success, not realizing she was already far beyond him. He had tried to claim what wasn't his because he felt entitled to her achievements even though he had contributed nothing to them. And now he was alone, broke, and publicly humiliated while she was building a billion-dollar empire and dating a successful venture capitalist who actually deserved her. His phone buzzed. Another bill. Another reminder. Another consequence of his own terrible choices. Derek looked at the photo of Imani from the Fortune article still open on his laptop. She looked happy, confident, and completely unbothered by his existence. He had once been married to this remarkable woman, and he had thrown it all away for nothing. The worst part wasn't the money or the career damage or even the public humiliation. The worst part was knowing that he had destroyed the best thing in his life through his own selfishness and stupidity, and there was absolutely nothing he could do to fix it. Imani Richardson had won completely, not by destroying him but by being so successful that his attempts to matter became pathetic footnotes in a much larger story. And he would spend the rest of his life watching her rise higher while he remained exactly where he was. Alone, bitter, and entirely responsible for his own misery. 1 year after the divorce, Imani stood backstage at her alma mater's business school, preparing to deliver the commencement keynote address. The same ceremony where Derek had served her divorce papers was now inviting her back as the featured speaker. The irony wasn't lost on her. 5 minutes, Ms. Richardson, the event coordinator said. Imani nodded and checked her reflection one last time. Navy suit, confident posture, calm expression. She looked like success because she was success. Richardson Biotech Consulting had officially been valued at $1.2 billion last quarter. They now employed 147 people across 5 offices in 3 countries. The company had closed deals worth over $2 billion in total contract value. She was 32 years old and running one of the fastest growing consulting firms in the healthcare industry. The coordinator led her to the stage entrance. Through the curtain, she could see the auditorium filled with graduating students, their families, faculty members. Somewhere in the back, uninvited but present according to security reports, was Derek. He had apparently bought a ticket through a secondary market, hoping to, what? She didn't know and didn't care. The dean introduced her with glowing remarks about her achievements, her innovation, her leadership. Then Imani walked out onto the stage to thunderous applause. She stood at the podium and looked out at the crowd. All these young faces, full of hope and ambition and uncertainty about their futures. She had been one of them just a year ago, sitting in those seats, holding her diploma and divorce papers simultaneously. "Thank you, Dean Morrison," Imani began. "It's an honor to be here, especially considering the last time I sat where you're sitting now was eventful." A ripple of knowing laughter went through the crowd. The story had become somewhat famous in business school circles. "I'm not going to pretend that day wasn't devastating," Imani continued. "I worked hard for my MBA while building a company, and I thought graduation would be a celebration of everything I had accomplished. Instead, it became one of the worst days of my life. But it also became a turning point because I had a choice in that moment. I could fall apart, or I could prove to myself and everyone else what I was capable of achieving." She paused, letting the words settle. "I chose achievement. I walked out of this auditorium, drove to my office, and closed a $450 million deal. That choice changed everything. Not because of the money or the success, but because I proved to myself that I could handle the worst day of my life and still show up for the best opportunity of my life." The audience was silent, listening intently. "Here's what I learned from that experience and the year that followed. Your success isn't defined by what happens to you. It's defined by how you respond to what happens to you. People will underestimate you. People will betray you. People will try to claim credit for your work or diminish your achievements. But none of that matters if you stay focused on building something meaningful." Imani looked directly at the section where security had indicated Derek was sitting. She couldn't see him specifically in the crowd, but she knew he was there. "Some of you might be going through difficult situations right now. Relationship problems, financial stress, self-doubt about whether you're good enough to compete in your chosen field. I want you to know that those challenges don't define your future unless you let them. Use them as fuel. Use them as motivation. Use them to prove to yourself what you're capable of achieving when you refuse to give up." She spent the next 20 minutes sharing practical advice about building careers, negotiating partnerships, managing growth, staying ethical in competitive industries. She talked about the importance of mentorship, citing Patricia's guidance. She discussed failure, recounting early rejections and setbacks that had taught her valuable lessons. She emphasized strategic thinking over reactive decision-making. In closing, Imani said, "I want to leave you with this. The best response to people who doubt you isn't anger or revenge. It's building something so remarkable that their opinions become irrelevant. Success isn't about proving other people wrong. It's about proving yourself right. Go build something that matters. Do it with integrity. And never, ever let anyone convince you that you're not capable of extraordinary things." The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Students were crying, cheering, taking photos. Imani soaked it in, this moment of pure vindication. 1 year ago, she had walked out of this very building humiliated and heartbroken. Now she was standing on this stage as a symbol of resilience and achievement. After the ceremony, Imani attended the reception where she was immediately surrounded by students, faculty, and alumni wanting to congratulate her, ask questions, or simply tell her how much her speech meant to them. She spent 2 hours networking, offering advice, encouraging the next generation of business leaders. She noticed Derek standing near the exit, watching her. He looked older, tired, diminished. Their eyes met briefly across the room. He started to walk toward her, but security intercepted him, gently but firmly escorting him away. She had given specific instructions. He was allowed to attend the public ceremony, but not to approach her at any private events. Patricia appeared with champagne. "That speech was perfect. You gave them hope without sugarcoating the reality of what it takes to succeed. I just told the truth about the struggles and the victories." "And Derek?" Security removed him. "I didn't even have to acknowledge his presence." "Good. You've moved so far beyond him that even letting him speak to you would be giving him more attention than he deserves." Later that evening, Imani returned to her office to find her team had decorated the conference room with congratulations banners. Nicole had organized a small celebration with the senior staff. To Imani, Nicole toasted, "Who showed all of us what's possible when you refuse to let circumstances define your future." They celebrated the speech, the company's growth, the upcoming expansion into Asian markets. Imani felt surrounded by people who genuinely appreciated her, who had worked alongside her to build something meaningful, who understood that success was a team effort even if she was the face of it. Her phone buzzed. A text from Julian: "Watched the live stream of your speech. You were brilliant. Proud of you. Dinner tomorrow to celebrate?" She replied, "Yes. Looking forward to it." They had been together for 6 months now, taking things slowly, building a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine connection. He supported her ambitions without trying to compete with them. He had his own successful career and understood the demands of building something significant. He made her laugh and challenged her thinking and never once tried to diminish her achievements. As Imani drove home that night, she reflected on the past year. She had gone from devastated and divorced to successful and thriving. She had built a billion-dollar company, earned industry recognition, inspired the next generation of business leaders, and found a partner who actually deserved her. Derek had tried to take credit for her success and been publicly humiliated. He had attempted to claim what wasn't his and ended up with nothing. He had thrown away the best thing in his life for a temporary affair, and now he was alone, struggling, and watching from the sidelines as she achieved everything he had once dismissed as her little business project. The vindication wasn't just about the money or the awards or the success, though those things mattered. The vindication was about proving to herself that she was capable of building something extraordinary, that her worth wasn't defined by someone else's inability to see it, that betrayal could become the catalyst for unprecedented achievement. Imani Richardson had been underestimated, betrayed, and humiliated. And in response, she had built an empire. That was the ultimate vindication, not destroying her enemy, but becoming so successful that his actions became irrelevant footnotes in a much larger success story. 18 months after the divorce, Imani stood in the conference room of Richardson Biotech Consulting's new headquarters, a full building they now owned in the financial district. The wall of windows overlooked the city, and she could see for miles in every direction. Symbolic, she thought, of how far she could see into her company's future. Patricia entered carrying a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. "Have you seen the final valuation report?" "I have. 2.4 billion. And it's surreal. 3 years ago we were in a shared office space. Now we own a building and have contracts that will carry us through the next decade." Patricia poured the champagne and handed Imani a glass. "You built this. Never forget that. You had a vision when everyone else saw obstacles. You executed when others would have given up. You deserve every bit of this success." They toasted and drank. The champagne was excellent, befitting a company worth billions. "I have news," Patricia said. "I've been offered a position on the board of Sterling Pharmaceuticals. They want our perspective on innovation and partnerships." "That's incredible. Are you taking it?" "Only if you're comfortable with me stepping back from day-to-day operations here. I'll remain a partner and advisor, but you'll be running everything directly." Imani felt a flutter of nervousness quickly replaced by confidence. "I can handle it." "I know you can. That's why I'm comfortable stepping back. This company is in the best possible hands." Later that afternoon, Imani had a meeting with her executive team about the latest expansion plans. They were opening offices in Tokyo and Singapore, had acquired a smaller consulting firm in Boston, and were developing proprietary software that would revolutionize how clinical trials were managed globally. The growth was aggressive but manageable, strategic but ambitious. Nicole interrupted the meeting with an apologetic expression. "Ms. Richardson, there's a call for you. It's marked urgent from Julian Mercer." Imani excused herself and took the call in her private office. "Julian? Is everything okay?" "Everything's perfect. Where are you right now?" "In my office." "Why?" "Look out your window. North side, street level." Imani walked to the window and looked down. Julian stood on the sidewalk looking up at her building, holding his phone. Even from this distance, she could see he was smiling. "What are you doing?" she asked, laughing. "Being spontaneous. Come downstairs. I have something to ask you." "Julian, I'm in the middle of a meeting." "This can't wait. Please?" Intrigued, Imani told her team to take a break and headed downstairs. She found Julian waiting in the lobby, and he immediately took her hand and led her outside to a quiet courtyard beside her building. "What's going on?" she asked. Julian took both her hands in his. "I've been thinking about timing and moments and how life works. We've known each other for almost a year. We've built something real, something based on mutual respect and genuine partnership. You inspire me every day with your intelligence, your drive, your integrity." "Julian, let me finish. I know you're busy building an empire. I know you have goals that will take years to achieve. But I also know that I want to be part of that journey, and I want you to be part of mine. Not as someone who competes with you or tries to claim credit for your success, but as an equal partner who celebrates your achievements and supports your ambitions while pursuing his own." He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a simple but elegant diamond ring. "Imani Richardson, will you marry me? Not because you need me or because I can offer you anything you haven't already achieved yourself, but because we're better together than we are apart." Imani stared at the ring, then at Julian, then back at the ring. A year ago, she was freshly divorced and convinced she would never trust anyone again. 6 months ago, she was cautiously dating, testing whether connection was possible alongside ambition. Now she was standing in front of a man who saw her clearly, appreciated her fully, and wanted to build a life with her as an equal partner. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." Julian slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her as her employees watched from the building windows above, cheering and applauding. That evening, they celebrated with Patricia, Nicole, and a small group of close friends at an intimate restaurant. Everyone toasted the engagement, and Patricia pulled Imani aside during dessert. "This is what you deserve," Patricia said quietly. "Someone who sees your worth and doesn't feel threatened by it. Someone who wants to build with you, not take from you." "It feels right," Imani said. "Completely different from before." "Because it is different." Derek wanted a wife who made him look good. Julian wants a partner who challenges him to be better. That's the difference between someone who drags you down and someone who lifts you up. Over the next few weeks, news of the engagement spread through business circles. Congratulations poured in from clients, colleagues, and industry leaders. The business press covered it briefly, focusing mostly on the professional accomplishments of both Imani and Julian rather than making it a romantic story. Derek predictably saw the news. He sent one text, "I hope you're happy." Imani blocked the number without responding. She was happy, but not in a way he could possibly understand. She was happy because she had built a life of meaning, purpose, and genuine connection. She was happy because she had proven to herself that she was capable of extraordinary things. She was happy because she had transformed the worst day of her life into the beginning of her greatest achievements. 3 months later, Imani and Julian were married in a small ceremony in Napa Valley, surrounded by close friends and family. Patricia was her matron of honor. The ceremony was elegant and intimate, nothing like the large traditional wedding she had with Derek. This one was about partnership, about two people who had built successful lives independently choosing to build something together. During her vows, Imani spoke directly to Julian. "You see me as I am and celebrate who I'm becoming. You support my ambitions without trying to claim them as your own. You challenge me to think bigger while respecting the work I've already done. You're my partner in the truest sense, and I'm grateful every day that I found you when I was finally ready to be found." The reception was joyful and celebratory. No business talk, no networking, just people who cared about them celebrating their happiness. Imani danced with Patricia, with Julian's mother, with Nicole, who had become more than an assistant, a friend. As the sun set over the vineyard, Imani stood with Julian looking out over the valley. "What are you thinking about?" Julian asked. "How different my life is from 2 years ago. How much has changed?" "Regrets? None. Every difficult moment led me here. To this company, to this life, to you. I wouldn't change any of it. Not even the graduation day divorce papers?" Imani laughed. "Especially not that. That was the day I proved to myself what I was capable of. That was the day I chose my future over my past." 6 months after the wedding, Richardson Biotech Consulting announced its largest contract yet. A 10-year, $3.2 billion partnership with a consortium of pharmaceutical companies to revolutionize global clinical trial management. The deal made headlines worldwide and cemented the company's position as the industry leader in innovative healthcare consulting. Imani was featured on the cover of Forbes with the headline, "The $3 billion Woman: How Imani Mercer Built a Healthcare Empire." The article detailed her journey from MBA student to industry leader, touching briefly on the dramatic circumstances of her divorce but focusing primarily on her strategic vision, leadership skills, and innovative approach to solving complex problems. Derek saw the magazine at a newsstand. He picked it up and stared at the cover, Imani looking confident and powerful, wearing a sharp suit, standing in front of her company's logo. The article mentioned her marriage to Julian Mercer, described as a partnership of equals who support each other's ambitious goals. It mentioned her company's valuation, her awards, her industry recognition. It mentioned Derek exactly once in a single sentence. Richardson founded her company while completing her MBA, shortly before her first marriage ended. One sentence. That was his entire legacy in her success story. Not a villain, not an obstacle, just a footnote so brief it could be missed entirely. He put the magazine back and walked away, finally understanding that he had lost completely. Not because Imani had destroyed him, but because she had built something so magnificent that his betrayal had become irrelevant to her narrative. She had won by being so successful that his actions were reduced to a momentary obstacle in a much larger triumph. Meanwhile, Imani sat in her corner office, the Forbes magazine on her desk, and smiled. She had started with nothing but a vision and determination. She had faced betrayal and humiliation. She had chosen to build instead of break, to create instead of destroy, to rise instead of fall. Richardson Biotech Consulting, now Richardson Mercer Consulting after Julian's venture capital firm had merged with her company to create something even larger. Employed over 200 people. They operated in 7 countries. They had revolutionized how pharmaceutical companies managed partnerships and clinical trials. They had a valuation that made them one of the most successful consulting firms in healthcare history. But more than the money or the recognition, Imani had built a life worth living. She had a partner who respected her, a company that reflected her values, a legacy that would outlast any temporary setback. She had proven that the best revenge wasn't destroying your enemies, it was building something so remarkable that their opinions became meaningless. Derek had divorced her thinking she was worthless. She had responded by becoming worth billions. He had tried to claim credit for her success. She had built something so undeniably hers that his claims were laughable. He had attempted to diminish her achievements. She had risen so high that his attempts looked pathetic in comparison. The empire Imani had built wasn't just about money or market dominance. It was about proving that betrayal could become fuel, that underestimation could become motivation, that the worst day of your life could become the catalyst for your greatest achievements. As she looked out over the city from her office, Imani Richardson Mercer, CEO, industry leader, wife, and living proof that success is the best response to those who doubt you, smiled knowing that her story was still being written, and every chapter ahead looked brighter than the last.
As we come to the end of today's story, I want you to sit with us for just a moment. Not just as the story, but as the reflections of something deeper. Because what you just witnessed isn't only about one woman's journey, it's about a truth that echoes far beyond this screen. It's about resilience that refuses to break, even when the world demands silence. It's about strength that isn't always loud, but always present, steady, unshaken, and undeniable. There's that even in the face of injustice, betrayal, poverty, or pain, there is something within these women that cannot be erased, a fire, a voice, a power that rises, no matter how many times it's pushed down. And maybe as you watch this story unfold, you saw more than just a character. Maybe you saw pieces of real life. Maybe you saw struggle that felt familiar. Maybe you saw courage that reminded you of someone or even yourself. Because these stories, while fictional, are rooted in something very real. They are inspired by lived experiences, by untold histories, by voices that deserve to be heard louder and clearer than ever before. Black women have always carried strength in ways the world often overlooks. They've turned pain into purpose. They've turned silence into resistance. They've turned survival into something powerful, something transformative. And that's why this story exists. Not just to entertain, but to honor. Not just to tell, but to remind. Not just to show struggle, but to celebrate the rise. Every scar you see in these stories represents something survived. Every tear represents something endured. And every victory, no matter how small, represents something deeply, profoundly powerful. So, if today's story moved you, if it made you feel something, if it stayed with you even after the screen fades to black, then it has done exactly what it was meant to do. And I want to invite you to be part of this journey because there are so many more stories to tell, so many voices to amplify, so many moments of truth, pain, courage, and triumph that deserves to be seen and heard. If you believe in stories that carry meaning, if you believe in strength that rises against odds, if you believe in truth, in resilience, and in the unstoppable spirit of Black women, then this is your space too. Stay with us, listen, feel, and most importantly,